Hey guys, how's it going? Very quick update video on what's been going on, why I haven't actually uploaded much stuff lately, which is something I keep saying on this channel. Also, celebratory beer, my old man's homebrew actually, so hopefully I won't need any Imodium to go with it once I've had some. But I wanted to let you guys know, because a lot of you have subscribed to my channel and you've been on this journey with me as well. I have finally passed my skills test and I am now a qualified pilot. So yay, I was well chuffed. So what I thought I'd do is actually tell some of you guys who've been following us for the flying what actually happened, and looking back on it now, you know what, before I did my skills test, there was a very handy Facebook page called UK Private Pilots Community, and it's a very good resource for anyone who's learning to fly. There's just loads of people on there who've been through it, they've done it all, and they've also ironed out all those little things that come after you've been flying, like, you know, which iPad to use if you're going to use like satellite nav and all that sort of stuff. So if you are thinking about flying, then 100% join that and have a look at that. But on that community, there were a lot of people, I'd asked them, I was like, what happens on your skills test? I'm absolutely bricking it. I'm really, really worried. I've had a few attempts at doing it already, and either the weather's not been very good or my planning hasn't been up to scratch. I actually got a little bit irritated with my examiner. I actually thought, this guy just hates me, doesn't want me to pass. And it took me a couple of weeks to realise the job that my examiner has is one of extreme importance, but also one that will resonate down the years as well, because they are the one who signs you off, and if anything happens in the future, you know, within the next 10 or 15 years or something, they will be referred to in in any investigation. So they've got a really, really important job. And when I realised that, and also the other thing, they want you to be safe and things like that, I just couldn't get my head around a little bit. I was like, oh man, I wish this guy would just let me in the bloody plane. So every time I asked people that in the private pilots community, people would say, look mate, don't worry about it, just have fun. They want you to pass and all that. And in the lead up to the skills test and the subsequent ones that I did have cancelled or delayed, I couldn't have throttled those people more. I was like, God, so annoying. How could they say that? It's such a flippant answer and not thought about. Now that I've passed, I'll quite happily join their ranks when it comes to saying to people who are thinking about doing it or they're getting to that skills test stage what to expect. So I wanted to do a little video about what happened. I didn't film anything in the plane. I did film some other lessons, some warm-up lessons that I'd done just to get me, just to watch as revision, which is what I do when I'm doing my flying, and I will continue to film my flying and add them to the Times of James channel. So what happened on the skills test? What happened? My skills test was due to start at 10 o'clock in the morning, and they said get there at 10, and I already know that this is a little trick basically. Will he get there at 10 or will he get there earlier? So I got there at 8:30, stripped down the plane. I did a little live video, didn't I, on this channel with my mobile phone. Effectively the same process as that, getting the plane ready, clean the windscreen, things like that, because a little bug smudge can also look a bit like a plane when you're up in the air. So get the whole screen cleared off and all that sort of stuff. Then my examiner turned up, Barry, and we went through my planning. Now this was a point where I'd failed a couple of times before, or Barry wasn't happy. He's like, you're not ready, you've got the right answers, but I'm not happy with how you've come to them. And in fact, I've actually got my planning still here. If I go over to my dad, this is my flying bag that I have when I go up, and this is my knee board. Let's have a quick look at my knee board very quickly so you can get an idea as to what it is and what it does. So here's my knee board. So I've got my checklist that I use for all my power checks and things like that. So you've got loads of things to go through there. Then on top of that, I've got my little watch here that I use to time my flight legs. And then while I'm flying, I use this is my diversion calculator as well, that just flips up. And on here, I've got my engine times. I've got notes that I've made along the flight. So these will be squawk codes here, and this will probably be a pressure setting. Then I've got my just mnemonic remembrance things, and also radio codes, VORs that are nearby, and their Morse code identifications, distances, checkpoints along the way, how long it's going to take us to fly that leg, when we get there, and actually when we did get there. So look, you can see my times are actually going really well for the nav there. If I pop this off, you'll also see the rest of my pilot log. So we fill all this out before we fly. That's like that. So we've got all our weights and balance on here. Fuel that we're going to use, and also things that we have to check along the way. So NOTAMs, weather, royal flights, sunrise, sunset, takeoff distance required, and crosswind. And then on the back, look, I've got a little Morse code thing because I've made this, I designed this myself. And obviously there, so I can fold that over, and then when we have a diversion, I can flip that up and the diversion key's there already. My takeoff distance stuff, so this is my takeoff distance calculations that I've done on there. And then the weather for the day as well, I always have just with me when we're flying up there. That's all sort of sat under that clip like you saw, so you can just flip that up and then you can look at the map. So then on the map, we've got Duxford here, Wadlow Wind Farm, our first leg to Shepherd's Grove, and then going down, this is the Watersham Mats here, Mats Military Air Traffic Zone, and that's where we gave me the diversion, and there's Hadley there, and then we flew over to Waterbeach, and then we sort of stayed here and did all our general handling stuff and bits and bobs. Underneath here, this is a nice little thing, I've got my plotter, so that just always lives in there, so then if I do anything, bang, plotter's on there straight away, and I can do my work. I've also got my pencil here with a string on it, so if I drop that in the cockpit, I can still get it up. And then on the back, just sort of various pens of different colours, so I can use that on my plotter. And that is what I have on my little knee board, basically. That's what flies with me every time I go up. So there you go, there's my knee board. So my planning side of things, especially things like weights and balances, which are really important, because some planes aren't going to perform, or every plane will perform differently, and sometimes they're not even allowed to perform to certain standards if you've got certain weight in the aircraft. So you need to figure out how much weight you've got in the aircraft. Will that allow you to fly? Will you have enough runway and enough distance to clear a 50-foot obstacle? So that's the takeoff distance required, the TODR. So we went through that, and I was expecting, like throughout my training, I was taught by my lovely teacher, Jeremy, to do the passenger brief. Do that with your examiner, like they're a passenger. You're effectively in control of this flight. You are pilot in command, and they want you to fly it as if they've never been in a plane before. But Barry's heard quite a few of these over the years, and I think he knows that everyone's pretty clued up on it. He said, look, go to the plane, get it started. I need to go for a wee or whatever, and I'll be out in a minute. So I get in the plane, and it won't start. It's first flight of the day. It's stone cold. I primed it 3 times with the primer and it just won't start. Oh, I'm like, man, this is the worst. Absolute worst. And then Barry came out and was like, he said, I can see you can't start it. He says, a little trick with this plane. And he sort of showed me this little trick and got it going. I was like, okay, cool. So then I start going through my run-up checks, which are the power settings checks, making sure your brakes work, checking your engine temperatures and pressures, make sure all the instruments in the aircraft are working properly, and all that sort of stuff. I look up at the combing, and there's about 60 school kids on a school trip out at Duxford, and they're all waving at us, and by now I am like already sweating buckets. I'm in this exam. This is something I've worked towards for almost the last 2 years, and it's cost quite a lot of money as well. It's not a cheap thing to go and do learning to fly. These kids are all waving at us, and Barry did this thing. He like broke the tension. He nudged me, and I looked up, and he went, "Oi, look!" And there are all these kids there, all these school kids, and they're all waving. And he said, "Aren't you going to wave at them?" And I was like, "Oh, all right." And we both waved. Me and my examiner, who to that point I've been terrified of, and that sort of set the tone for the rest of the skills test. So we go off to the taxi point, and actually while we're taxiing, we're having a bit of a chat. And Barry looks to you, your examiner looks to you, to how are you going to plan this flight out? Are you going to do it in 2 flights? Are you going to do it in 1 flight? And also knowing that you've got to do upper air work, which means you need 3,500 feet of altitude when you're doing stall recovery and stuff like that. And I'd checked the weather, and I'd noticed that the cloud base is going to rise later in the day. So I said, look, why don't we get some circuits done now, because we have to do circuit work. You know, let's do that. We'll wait, and hopefully by sort of 12 o'clock, we'll find that the cloud base is lifted, and we can go and do our navigation section and our upper air work. So he was like, yep, like that idea, let's go and do it. Did all my checks, clear permission for takeoff, and then off we went, taking off. As soon as we get up into the air, about 300 feet, Barry cuts the engine. I was like, here we go, this is it, we've started the test. I mean, you've started the test already, but this is proper Bang, engine failure. Straight away I was like, mayday, 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 Duxford information, Classic Wings 20, engine failure, taking off runway 24, doing a forced landing in the field at the end of runway 24, Classic Wings 20, squawk 7700 in your transponder. But while you're doing that, you've already trimmed for 70 knots, the best glide for that aircraft. And then bang, I'm telling Barry, when you brace, I want you to put your hands on the coaming. When I say brace, open the door and leave away from the propeller. I will take the fire extinguisher and the first aid kit with me unless I otherwise specify for you to take it. Now we're gonna go and land. And then Barry said, which field are you picking? And don't worry guys, we're not gonna land in a field here. It's a practice force, it's an EFARTO, emergency force landing after takeoff. Basically I said that field there, and every time you get more and more sure that you're gonna get to that field, you add a stage of flap. Once you're definite you're going to get there, you put on all the flap. You've got 40 degrees on our plane, 40 degrees of flap, and the plane, you get there, and in real life what would hopefully happen is you'd land at a speed of roughly, I don't know, 40 miles an hour, something like that. Not very quick at all. I mean, you can land these planes really slowly, especially you've got a nice headwind. So as soon as I said, yeah, we're going to go for that field, and as soon as he was sure we were going to get there, we carried on up into the circuit, did a standard landing, just a standard, flew the circuit, did my downwind checks, things like that. Well, we landed that, quite a nice landing. Next one is what we call a glide approach. So we got up to 1,500 feet in the circuit. We have to get cleared permission to do that. And he cut the power, then straight away, yet again, mayday, 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 Classic Wings 20, engine failure on the downwind, landing on runway 24 now, emergency landing. So then air traffic control tell everyone to get the hell out of Dodge because Jimmy's got a massive problem with his plane and he's got to land without any engine power. And it's very similar. You turn straight to the runway pretty much. You try to get back to the runway. And then the more sure you are that you're going to land there, the more flap you can add. And that was a really good exercise actually. They can be very difficult glide approaches. And this is going to sound counterproductive. We didn't have any wind on this day. And aeroplanes that are designed to fly and glide, especially Cessnas, they love it. And they're hard to get down sometimes. And you're allowed to use a certain section of the runway for a glide approach. So they do that to simulate whether you've had to do it on a short field or something like that, a smaller aerodrome. I basically got round, landed it nicely. I actually knew I'd have to turn away a few times to get rid of altitude because we didn't have a lot of winds in our face, slowing us down and allowing us to sink. But we got down really like exactly where he wanted us to land, and off we went up again. And this, I think we did a couple more circuits, a few more bits and pieces. What else did we do? Oh yeah, we did a flapless landing, which is when we used the trim to trim the aircraft for best glide speed, which is 70 knots roughly in a Cessna, with the one I'm flying. And then we use our engine power to gauge how far we descend, to arrest any descent if we think we're getting a bit too low, and also to accelerate it by taking off the throttle and allowing us to sink even more. And they're easier to do when you've got a headwind, but like I said, this day we didn't have a headwind at all. I knew what I was going to do there was I was going to elongate my downwind so it was a bit further away, turn base, and then turn onto final with a lot more distance back to the runway. Because I've got engine power, it's getting down that's the issue when you do a flapless landing. But that all went okay. Pulled up straight back into the circuit again. These are all what we call go-arounds. And everything felt like it was going okay. I was like, this is going all right. Got up into the circuit, and bearing in mind, you've got to do all the radio calls and everything. He said, right, we've finished the circuits now. By now, we've got a nice cloud base of about 2,900, something like that, 3,000 feet, and it's rising all the time. So I said, right, if we've done that, I think we can go on our nav now. So he said, okay, let's do the nav. And that's it. It doesn't say anything else. It's up to me to go Duxford information, Classic Wings 20, climbing up to 2,500 feet on the downwind leg, leaving the circuit to the northeast, Classic Wings 20, like that. And they'll come back, great, fine, you know, that's brilliant. And here's my route. Here is my route that we flew on the nav, and you're actually going to see my diversion as well. So we've got the route here that we went on, and we've got our arrows there for wind and all that sort of stuff. And also here's my pilot log as well. We climb up and we get towards a place called Wadlow Wind Farm. It's not advisable to start a nav from your aerodrome when you take off. It's a better idea to have a waypoint about 5 miles away from the aerodrome so you can get the plane up to altitude, make sure everything's okay, get the plane trimmed out, and also just get everything relaxed. You've got your knee board, you're ready to take the time down. which is why I've got a little digital watch just on there. And you're ready to go. You're actually ready to go. This is going to be good. Really, really good. We get to Wadlow Wind Farm. I turn onto the heading. And then this is at the point where if you're flying on one of these routes, we're going to go through Lakenheath airspace. So I radio through Duxford information, Classic Wings 20, request frequency change to Lakenheath, or Lakenheath approach on 128.900. And they'll come back saying, Classic Wings 20, frequency change approved, have a good day. It's a little trick, the old have a good day, I always think, because if you do proper radio telephony, you should never go back, oh, thank you very much, something like that. It's all about expediency when you're on the air, and also don't be ambiguous. You're there to tell people exactly what you're doing in the shortest, most succinct way possible. So then we did that, and we flew up to Lakenheath. We flew up through Mildenhall Lakenheath airspace, and we're going to my first place, Shepherd's Grove. We got towards Shepherd's Grove in roughly the time I thought, and everything was going okay. Barry's looking out the window, looking down at Newmarket and all the studs that are there, all the money that's spread out below you in these four-legged beasts that are there, talking about stuff like that. And really now I've actually settled into it. We get to Shepherd's Grove and you have to do things like turn time, and we were going to fly south to Birch, which means we fly through Wattisham airspace. So straight away I'd say something along the lines, I'll be talking to Lakenheath all the way, they'll give us a squawk code to put into our transponder, and I'd be getting ready. While we were flying up there, I'd already have Wattisham and the changeover frequency on the radio, so I can get that changed over. And then I'd say something like, Lakenheath approach, Classic Wings 20, request frequency change to Wattisham approach 125.800. And they'd say something like, frequency change approved, squawk 7,000, have a nice day. Because they're American and they're cool, really cool. Flew down south to Wattisham. Now I know enough about skills tests because I've done so much research that I was never going to get to Birch, our next destination. I knew that I was going to get diverted somewhere. And this is what this line here means. Halfway down, Barry goes, Birch is shut, we can't land there, or there's a thunderstorm. We need to divert to Waterbeach, which is just north of Cambridge and about 20 nautical miles away, something like that. And then you have to sit up in this plane, plot a route, a heading, how quick it's going to be, if you've got enough fuel, and you've got to do all that with the kneeboard here and one pen, and all the while flying the plane, looking out the window for other traffic, responding to people on the radio. First thing I did, as soon as he said that, I picked out a place called Hadley, and bearing in mind I'm in Wattisham's controlled airspace at the moment, and I radio, I go Wattisham radar, or Wattisham approach, Classic Wings 20, we are going to head out to the west to Waterbeach, just planning and circling over Hadley, which is a little village. He loved that. Barry was like, I like that. You haven't just gone off and done something. You've told them what you're doing. You've kept it safe. So we circled round Hadley a little bit while I just did all my calculations, and I've got a thing called a wind wheel here. When I'm planning my route wind, because obviously the wind's going to push us off and onto course and things like that, I can plan out in which direction I go in, how much correction angle I'm going to have to take. So 3 degrees if 3 degrees if it's a reasonably light wind or something like that, and also how quick we're going to be going. And straight away I use my plotters to say, right, I'm going that direction. I've got a correction angle of 3 degrees, so instead of being 270, it's going to be, I don't know, 273 degrees. I know I'm going to be going that quick. It's that far, and I've got a little table here that tells me how quick I'm going and how long it's going to take me to get there. So I said to Barry, we are going to be on a heading of 305, and it's going to take us 19 minutes to get there. And he's like, okay, fly the route. So off we go on our diversion, happily going towards Waterbeach. Only I notice suddenly I'm over 2 aerodromes, Chedborough and Lavenham. I come over Lavenham. Straight away I know that we've got a bit of a problem here. We are about 10 degrees off course. Now that could have been due to either a slight calculation error on my part, but also it can be due to the fact that wind speeds are a forecast and they sometimes don't actually happen. So I realised that. I said the thing is, if you make a mistake or you realise things are going wrong, it's very important you vocalise what you're doing. So I said, right, Barry, we're over Lavenham. We're about 5 miles off track at the moment. I think I'm going to take off 10 degrees to account for that. And he's like, okay, see if we get there. So as we start leaving Wattisham's area, things start to sort of get a bit better. I notice a pylon along the way that we're looking out for, and Newmarket and Newmarket Heath are really easy to see from while we're up there. things are going all right. And I've transferred over to Cambridge as well. So I've gone Watersham approach, classic wings 20, request frequency change to Cambridge on 123.605. Ring up Cambridge on 123.605. They give us a squawk code. They give us an updated pressure setting for our altimeter. And we're on the way to Cambridge. You know, everything's going well. We've talked to people the whole way we were up there. And he said, can you see Water Beach yet? And I looked over the coming of the aircraft. I couldn't see it. And this is the worst bit. And also my time was out by about 2 minutes, but that's okay. And then I saw it. I saw it coming out of the haze. And there it was. And I said, there's Water Beach down there. And he looked at me and he said, right, you've just completed the nav section. And you're like, right. I've done the nav. I've done half my circuits. Upper air works to come. So he goes, right, let's do upper air work, climb to 3,500 feet. So I actually radioed through to Cambridge, said Cambridge radar, classic winds 20, holding pattern over Wadlow Wind Farm, climbing 3,500 feet to do stalls and general handling. And then they know what you're doing, they're happy, they know where you are. Everyone else knows where you are, he's on that frequency as well, and it's just safe. So we climb up to 3,500 feet and he says, I want you to do a clean wing stall. So clean wing stall is effectively no flaps, completely level, pulling back on the engine, pulling back on the yoke to get the plane in a nose up attitude with no engine power, and waiting for the plane to stall, the stall warner to go, and then recovering from that. So nose down, full throttle, right rudder. The thing that catches a lot of students out is when they're told to do this, they go straight into the actual thing, they're doing it. You've got to do a Hazel check first, which is a special mnemonic thing that we remember. So we do, Hazel stands for height, so sufficient to recover, so 3,500 feet should be good. Airframe, so basically that means clean wing, flaps up, normal configuration. S stands for security, so tightening up our harnesses, making sure the doors and everything are latch closed. Make sure as well, if you've got any gyros, that they're caged. We don't have any of those. It's quite rare to have to do that, I think. Engine after that, so temperatures and pressures, are they okay? Temperatures and pressures all right? Make sure they're okay. And then we've got location, and there's a little mini mnemonic that comes after location, which is A, B, C, D. So A stands for aerodromes. Are we near any other aerodromes? Are we near gliders? We're having a look around. B, built up areas. Are we going to be over people's houses, irritating them? And also if there's a problem, you know, that might become a bit of an issue if to do a forced landing. C, which is controlled airspace. And also clouds. So are we near any clouds? Are we going to fly into cloud? Are we near controlled airspace like Stansted? And then that's that particular sort of mini mnemonic area done. And the last L in the Hazel check is lookout. So you can look out in one of two ways. You can do a complete 180, or you can do 90 degrees one way, 90 degrees back the other way. Done that, now you can do your stall. So my clean wing stall went okay. Then he said, right, I want you to do a stall with 2 stages of flap in a turn. So you put 2 stages in, or you configure the plane, which takes a few minutes to get to. You have to slow the plane down, so then you can put flap in. And then you go into a turn, and then effectively just keep pulling up, pulling up, pulling up, until you hear the stall warner. Then it's nose down, yet again, full throttle, everything right rudder, but stay in the turn until you've got an increasing airspeed. I usually wait till I'm doing about 70 knots, and then roll your wings out, and then recover up. After that, I did a stall that was a full flap stall, so as if you're coming in on final. So full flaps, literally just pull up, and then as soon as the stall warner goes and the plane sort of cocks forward a bit, nose down, full throttle, everything. Get rid of that last stage of flap as soon as you possibly can, and then climb up, get above a certain altitude, and then you can get rid of your flaps. Suddenly he said, you've got an engine fire, what are you going to do? And it's like, what? Sorry, what? Engine fire? He goes, you've got an engine fire, what are you going to do? So it's like, right, I'm going to shut the engine down, so I go mixture. You just tap it, you tap everything. Mixture lean, throttle closed, carb heat cold if you can be bothered, fuel off, magnetos off, leave the radio on. Mayday, 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 classic wings 20, you have an engine fire, 3,500 feet over Wadlow Wind Farm, 2 POB, doing a forced landing in a field somewhere. You don't actually press the button, you just sort of press next to it to pretend you're making the transmission. Squawk 7700 on the transponder, and also we've got a beacon as well, get that out, and then enter what we call a steep descending turn. So power off, go into a 45-degree angle of bank, and then just keep your airspeed at 90 knots, and you lose a lot of height on the way down. And he'll tell you at what altitude he wants you to stop, So he said about 2,000 feet, I think. So we got down, I rolled out, and he was like, great, engine fire's out. And then he said, actually, no, we've got a problem though now. We've now got to do a forced landing. We go into the forced landing pattern. You've always got in your head where the wind's coming from. So you effectively turn so the wind is at your back. And then you look out and you're like, is there a field there or a field there? Because if their field's there, you're already on that downwind sort of thing. And you effectively then do a glide approach. So you go round. You remember to tell Barry as you come in to brace and what he's going to do as you come in to do that. And then again, every time you get more and more sure you're going to make the field, you add another stage of flap. Then he's happy that you're going to make the field, and then it's full throttle yet again, recover. And then sometimes, well, it didn't do it to me actually. Sometimes my instructor, when I did that, would just pull the throttle again and be like, oh, still got a problem, we've got to land somewhere. And they just constantly throw stuff like this at you. Then after that, we got up to 2,000 feet and just did steep turns, which is when you go into a 45-degree angle of bank, add another 100 RPM to the engine, and just do a steep turn around and round and round to a designated heading without losing or gaining altitude. And you've got about 100 feet sort of tolerance. And that went okay. And then he got on the radio, said, right, I'm going to do the radio now. We're going back to Duxford to do more circuits. And like, guys, you realise now how absolutely brutally knackering it is doing this. Skills tests are just gore. They're really, 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 really knackering. Especially when you knew your skills test is coming up and you haven't been able to sleep for a few days because you are bricking it. We get back towards Duxford and he said, right, just do a normal landing on 2-4 hard. Well, we got a rejoin. Oh no, another thing we did, we tracked a VOR beacon as well, which went really well actually. And I think if any of you have watched the videos that I've done lately, you'll know that I struggled a little bit with that. And that went okay. Let's have a little bit more of Dad's homebrew, shall we? Just need to get a bit of liquid in me. So then we got back to Duxford, joined the circuit, got rejoin information. So you say something like, you basically ask for a frequency change from Cambridge. You've heard me do that a few times. And then you go, something like, Duxford information, classic wings 20, currently 2,000 feet over Wadlow wind farm, request rejoin information. And they'll tell you the QFE and any traffic there might be about and what wind they've got on the runway as well at that time. We come back to Duxford, do a standard landing. And now we get up again and he wants us to do short field landings and grass landings. And we're coming up to a point where I thought I'd failed the test actually. I thought I'd done something so wrong that it would be a fail. And I dug my way out of it somehow or other. So we came down, we did a short field landing, which is trimming the aircraft with full flap at 62 knots roughly. So you're going a little bit slower than you normally would. As soon as you land, put the brakes on, stop the aircraft as quickly as you can. And it's actually amazing how quickly you can land or how much short distance you can land a Cessna and stop in. It's really, really cool. We did that and he said, right, I want you to taxi to the end of the runway, backtrack to the end of the runway, and we'll do another one. We'll do a short field takeoff, which is 10 degrees of flap, brakes on, full power, let the brakes off, bang, off you go. So we're going down the runway, we get to about 55 knots, which is VR, which is velocity rotate. So it's the point at time where you can pull back on the yoke and make the aircraft go airborne. And at that point, he reached over, put his hand over the airspeed indicator, which is an incredibly important instrument when flying a plane. It tells you how close you are to stalling, how quick, how slow you're going. You look at it, honestly, you look at it every 5 seconds when you're flying. He goes, airspeed indicator failure, what are you going to do? Now, I should have instantly pulled the power, put the brakes on and aborted the takeoff. But I felt that maybe we were coming to the end of the runway because, you know, your nose up, you can't really see down the runway that much. So I committed to flight and he looked at me and he's like, you've just failed aborting a takeoff. You just failed it. I was like, oh God. Oh, I couldn't believe it. You know, he got this so far. I said, keep your hand over the airspeed indicator. I said, if this was real life and I had committed to flight, I would still have to somehow get out of this situation, wouldn't I? And he said, well, yeah. So he kept his hand on it and I flew a circuit without the airspeed indicator. I flew it using the engine tone and the nose up, nose down attitude of the plane. Because you know you can set the engine in a Cessna at 2,100 RPM. If you've got the nose like flying along in a nice horizontal way, you're probably going to be doing about 90 knots. So I went round, did that, came into land. I only landed with 2 stages of flap because I wanted the extra speed should there be a problem. And as we were coming in on final, he said, how fast do you think you're going? And I was like, I don't know, it feels like about 80 knots at the moment. And he sort of had a look under his hand and was like, Came in, flared, landed, all without the airspeed indicator. And he looked at me and said, that was brilliant. He said, that was really good, the way that you, in a way, saved the exam as well, but the way that you actually acted as if it was an emergency, and that you have done this, you've got up there and you've still got us down safely. I think that was brilliant. And it was really, really, yeah, I was like, oh, man, breathe a sigh of relief there. I thought I'd done it. Still didn't know if I'd passed or not. I mean, we'd had a bit of a cock up on the nav. There was a couple of moments, I think, where I might have, my terminology on the radio could have been better. And then there's this major thing that I've just done here. So he said, right, backtrack to the end of the grass runway. Let's do one more full circuit. So we get to the end of the runway. We start going down there and he went, oil pressure's gone, oil pressure's gone. Straight away, bang, cut the engine, didn't I? Whammed the brakes on. And then did an effective aborted takeoff. We did a few other things as well, actually. We did a precautionary landing, which is when you fly over a runway at about 500 feet and have a look down at it to make sure everything's okay. And then you go up. We also did a poor weather circuit, which is he stipulates that the cloud base is 800 feet and you effectively fly like an oval shape below that height. So you can always see the runway. It's always sort of near enough to you. But you're not high enough and in the clouds, so that's their poor weather circuits. Oh, guys, I'm getting tired now. Yeah, then he said, right, take us back to parking. And we got back to parking and, oh my God. We parked up and he actually hopped out. He said, I'm just going to hop in now. I think maybe he needed the toilet again or something. And I went through my shutdown checks, pulled the mixture, pulled the throttle, and the engine just went, stopped. And for 2.5 hours, it's been engine noise, just going mad. Like you've been going through this whirlwind of forced landings and engine failures and stalls and navigating and taking times and talking on the radio. And after all of that, you're just left with the whirring sound of gyros and it's completely silent. And you just sat in the cockpit and you're like, whew. You know what? There's a film, Memphis Belle, is actually about flying. And there's a bit at the end of that when they get back and land and they take their headsets off and they just go and pop them on the yoke and they're just like, oh. And that is how I felt in that moment. I honestly was drained. I was wringing wet, soaked, drained, just done in, done in. So I tied the plane down, went up to the tower where Barry was waiting for us for the last part, which is a verbal examination. And by now you're running on empty. Fortunately, I had a packet of love hearts that Emily had given me, and I munched a couple of love hearts, actually, sort of dosed myself up with a bit of sugar, and went in there, and he asked me a couple of questions about what we'd done. We looked back over the nav route. He asked me a few questions about the operating systems on the aircraft, so things like how the flaps work, how the oil system works, how magnetos work and why we test them, things like that. I still thought I must have failed because of that bit and the nav. And he said, do you want a cup of tea? And I said, oh mate, I'd murder a cup of tea. And he made me a cup of tea and sat in that control tower, a control tower that has controlled US Air Force aircraft, Douglas Bader's lot. He would have sat in the same room as me in World War II. The earliest pilots back to, like 1914, World War I and all that. And all the history that's at Duxford, the privilege of sitting in Duxford's control tower. He popped my cup of tea down and he was like, that's the cup of tea for someone who's just passed their skills test. And I got up and I went, fucking come on, like that. I was just, and he was like, whoa. I was like, come on, mate. Absolutely. I don't know if some of you guys saw that video when I did my solo flight. Absolute feeling of achievement. And the feeling of all my friends and family knowing that it was going on today. I knew that they were all rooting for me. There's a couple of guys who got me into flying. They were all really rooting for us. They all know, they know more than anyone else how difficult it is to pass a skills test. And just to think, tonight I'm going to ring up these people and tell them that finally I am a qualified pilot. And telling Emily when I got back, and also telling my parents, and to be the first, to have a pilot's license, to be able to now hire a plane and fly anywhere in the world, fly abroad, fly to France, fly all over the UK, and you do 9 written exams that are brutal, absolutely brutal. You do a radio telephony course, which was like 2 or 3 days of revision that I did with my friend Steve Wilkes. who was brilliant. I mean, you guys have seen that. Doing the cross-country navigation exercise, which is something you have to do. Doing exercise 14, which is the first solo. It's something everyone has to do. You have to do it once. And then just building up your hours, and then getting to that bit where you have to go and be prepared to go into a skills test and do all of that. It was a feeling of complete achievement. The whole thing was just yeah, like sometimes you don't want to be big-headedly proud, but fucking hell, you can be proud of yourself if you've gone through something for 2 years and you've gone through all these horrible stages that are difficult, that are draining, that you don't have to go and sit exams anymore. I don't have to do that. I'm an adult. I've done my exams in life. And to have to go through all that, go back to school, learn things, and to get to the end of it all with a cup of tea in the control tower at historical Duxford aerodrome with my little plane sat outside. It's not mine, but you know, IJ is my little baby. And just sit there and knowing you've done all of that is honestly one of the best feelings I've ever had in my life. It was absolutely fantastic. From now on, I am a qualified pilot. I'm waiting for my bits and pieces to turn up, but I am a qualified pilot. And that is the best feeling in the world. So almost as good as marrying my darling wife and meeting her. I will be doing some more vlog stuff soon and some film stuff as well on this channel. So do hit the subscribe button. At least I hope that these videos have given you an idea of what it's like to go through it all and do it. I will never, ever forget the fun hours that I had flying with Jeremy, my instructor. In fact, the only slight sad side to all of this is the fact that I won't fly with Jeremy so much in the future anymore. Even though I did promise him, I think in my 3rd hour, back in March 2018, I said to him, if I ever pass this, Jeremy, I promise you I will fly you to Latuke for lunch. And he totally forgotten about it, but I reminded him about it over the phone a few days ago because obviously the first person I called to say that I'd passed was my instructor. So I can't thank Jeremy enough for his patience and how quiet he was. That was a very, very quiet guy, but he just lets you get on with it, you know. It was an absolutely fantastic experience, and I'm sad it's over, but I'm glad it's over as well. So thanks very much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next Times of James video. I love you all very much. And here's a photo just after I tied the plane down and been told that I'd passed. See you soon.